Welcome. In this edition, we will talk about Kurukshetra. The major focus of this edition for June was on cooperatives and food security in India. So, food security is to meet with the idea of sustainable development goals, and it's not just about the availability of food, but the proper access, affordability, storage, and the complete channel, which includes the post-harvest losses, the inefficient PDS distribution system to be monitored thoroughly. So now the cooperative sector has played a vital role, and with the help of primary agricultural credit societies, we have gained impact in gaining procurement for the grains and managing the grains. Of the total production of the food grain which is required, India contributes a significant proportion. Now, of this, India faced a shortfall of nearly 47 million tons, producing 1131 million tons against the required 1178 million tons, and therefore there was an immediate need to address the agricultural credit societies. Now, what is vital is to understand that India has nearly 1.3 lakh PACs, which is the agricultural credit societies, with nearly 130 million members for those, and these societies have provided major role to the farmers for adapting to the business models, providing them the inputs, training, storage. In cooperative systems, Tamil Nadu has nearly 94% of the fair price shops which actually come under the PDS. Mother Dairy is one of the major brands for milk. Similarly, Amul is another major cooperative which has been successful. In Maharashtra, Academy of Development Science has established grain banks, which is vital for tribal areas, rural population. And then we have NAFED, which is the National Agricultural Cooperative Marketing Federation of India, and this has a major role in central procurement and storage system and channelizing the inefficiencies in the management, if any. Now, the idea is Sehkar se Samriddhi, prosperity from cooperative, which is one of the major ideas. Over the years, we have seen around 10 to 15% of the agricultural produce is lost, which accounts for nearly 92,000 crores every year, and that could be either due to post-harvest losses, loss due to improper storage or rotting, which leads to significant financial setback, and therefore there is a need to improve the food management, food processing and food distribution system. So the godowns of the FCI face numerous challenges, which is in terms of infrastructure, high storage cost, declining quality of food supply and excessive food subsidies which are given. So to recognize these limitations, there have been a new plan, which is the world's largest grain storage plant, and the food security fund, which has been ensured, and government has approved nearly 700 lakh metric tons of additional storage capacity in the next 5 years for storing the food supply due to the insufficient storage facilities which are currently available. Also, the PAC system is now being decentralized with more storage facilities at the ground root level, and there is convergence of numerous schemes which includes infrastructure, marketing, mechanization and formalization of microprocessing. Also, we are talking about the governance mechanism. So there is a cold chain scheme, cooperative development, NABARD, Grameen Bhandara Yojana. Then we have the agricultural marketing infrastructure, which talks about 33% of the subsidies for various storage, and then focusing on the infrastructure, the farmagriinfra.dac.gov.in, which is the website through which the procurement, the investments take place, and also the loans are carried at a very low rate of 3% per year, which is a highly affordable rate for the farmers. Now, Ministry of Cooperation has worked with other departments as a nodal agency for public awareness, monitoring the dashboards, funding the procedures, pooling and capacity building. Now, capacity building is one of the major ideas under which we talk about training modules, educational materials, focused trainings, key areas which includes inventory management, control, production and digital procurement, land pooling mechanism where godowns are constructed at the ground root level, simplified funding mechanism where extensive financial support is being provided for utilization, then monitoring the dashboards with digital digitalization and artificial intelligence. Now this supports the stakeholders, which mainly in the form of program implementation through the data driven programs and AI programs, launching awareness among the public and creating initiatives, the impact of those mainly in the terms of buffer stock and public distribution system. Now as we said, the regulated storage facilities are important. There has been minimizing of the post harvest losses which have taken place. The digital procurement platforms help them to actually use them with farmers and government bodies, and then there is better product and price realization, livelihood, and the progress towards achieving the sustainable development goals. If we look onto this diagram, we'll understand the 5 pillars that we have been talking on, from the quality handling to price assurance to better livelihood, sustainable goals that are to be met along with the food security. Now, some of the goals that are being targeted is removing the poverty, providing zero hunger, decent work and economic growth, innovation in the industry and modern methods to handle food grain, better consumption and production, climate action and partnership for the goal. And through this, the world's largest infrastructure for storage, we aim to achieve food security at the grassroots levels and bring a vital initiative with a well organized approach. Has been very important. Now the next is a cooperative sector. Now as we said, Amul, Mother Dairy have been some of the examples, but these cooperatives actually shield the members from the market uncertainties and provide them better opportunity to be part of the group, along with enhancing the investments from the members. So they operate with better efficiency and cooperativeness. There is a small scale asset with traditional knowledge that can work together, and there are not just the investor driven approaches, but individuals working together for bringing in the development of the cooperative. If we look from the global perspectives, according to the International Cooperative Alliance, 12% of the world's population is actually involved with 3 million cooperatives directly or indirectly and provides employment to 280 million people. Now, International Labour Organizations under the recommendation 193 talks about the skills for decent work, reducing poverty and sustainable development, and it offers training programs like RCOOP, which is one of the major programs aligning with the goals of sustainable development. This was founded back in 1895 with participation of 100 nations to lead the global cooperative collaboration. Among this, Asia Pacific Wing promotes education, training and startup opportunities for youth and women. But there are still numerous challenges in terms of rapid technology, adoption of technology, and with automation, the job insecurities that are growing up in the sectors of cooperatives. So there is a call for innovative pedagogies and platforms such as Mandragon and similar models for adaptive learning to adopt to the changing scenarios. Now, if we talk about India, we have the National Policy for Skill Development, the National Skill Development and Entrepreneurship Policy, and National Skill Development Mission, which together have been very important. Now, these include subsets and flagship programs like Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, Skill India, Apprenticeship Promotion, Jan Shikshan Abhiyan, Sankalp Strives, Skill Hubs, and so on. So there has been a continuous refinement of the policies, and there are 5 national skill training institutions which have been announced again in 2023. So with the institutional innovation, for example, Bhuvan Sarkari University Bill, Sehkari University Bill was being promoted to upgrade the Indian Rural Management Association into a national university focusing on cooperative education for the idea of Viksit Bharat and Sahkar Se Samiti, and there are nearly 8.5 lakh cooperative societies in India which can improve efficiency and accountability. We again have a scheme which is known as UI scheme. Now this talks about the promotion or the participation of the young, basically involving the youth authors across various genres. It could be fiction, non-fiction, poetry or research. Challenges and opportunities have been well cited, specifically when we are talking about cooperatives. Some of the notable cooperatives in the world we have highlighted are Amul, IFCO, Krikbo. So those are some of the major cooperatives from India. And then we have initiatives which have proposed the National Cooperation Policy, which the establishment of Cooperative Organics Limited, Cooperatives Export Limited. Then we have multi-state cooperative societies. So all these have been working together to bring in development in the field of food security in India. The next is 5th June is considered as the World Environment Day, and there has been this time the mission One Nation, One Mission and Plastic Pollution under the flagship program of LIFE, which is Lifestyle for Environment. The theme says no to single-use plastic, specifically at the site of segregation, collection and recycling. And then there are awareness about the plastic and the plastic pollution that has been brought in. There has been a initiative through the private sector which is known as Meri Life, Lifestyle for Environment, and the participation of the people. Also revival of the mangrove forest in the coastal areas to improve sustainability and community resilience. Local partnership, reviving of the Aravali's, which is one of the India's oldest mountain chain. And then there was an event which was held in Udaipur this year which talked about the highlights from the forest area, from the environmental works, and a detailed action plan for Aravali landscape was highlighted in the same. Also, the next is the action-based plan. Now, this talks about a science-driven, community-focused, policy-supported strategy with planting native species, natural regeneration, involving youth and women, and having integration of various government schemes along with agroforestry. Mangroves, as we said, is one of the major ideas, because mangroves span for nearly 5,000 square kilometers. The area has increased mainly in the areas of West Bengal, Andaman and Gujarat. We have seen mangrove population, and this actually protects the waves entering into, and therefore they are very beneficial for the coastal ecosystem. So for that, the National Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority has been working well, specifically on the degraded areas through the MISHTI program, which is the Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitat and Tangible Income. And then we have the National Coastal Mission, which focuses on coral reefs, mangroves, with nearly 38 mangrove sites and 4 coral sites across India. There is another project which is known as the Green Climate Fund, enhancing climate resilience for India's coastal community, popular in Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra and Odisha area. And then one of the interesting facts is mangroves can store up to 4 times more carbon, and therefore they contribute significantly to lowering the carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere. If we talk about the proportion of mangroves, we can see the highest proportion is in West Bengal, followed by Andaman and Nicobar, and then we have followed by Gujarat, and then we have Andaman, Nicobar and other areas where we have significant mangrove cover. The next is the burning of the crop residue. Now, around 1986, we were adapting with the modern mechanized farming techniques. However, the traditional harvesting systems preserved the roots, and the left behind residues were burned, and this was a very economical way to clear the fields. So burning of the rice, which is called as the stubble burning, before the winter prepares the land so that the next sowing for the wheat season could be done in the cooler months. The wheat residues are burned before the monsoon arrival, and in case of sugarcane, we are actually doing the residue burning after the harvest, either during the post monsoon season or the pre-summer period. That depends on when the crop is being sowed, but this is the common practices. However, recently we have seen that this leads to harmful pollutants like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide compounds and particulate matter into the atmosphere. So there are other practices which have been utilized nowadays. However, if we talk about the common practices, crop residue burning has been common in India, China, Mexico, Philippines. Bioenergy has been common in US, China, EU, Brazil. Animal feed and composting in Sub-Saharan Africa, EU, Mexico, Pakistan and Nepal. residues as fertilizers in China, and non-till farming in the regions of US, Canada, Brazil and Australia. Now, if we talk about the fodder generation and the fodder burn, we have seen the increase in the amount of the burnt fodder and even the increase in the fodder which has been generated over the years. So, initiatives have been given to the farmers to actually opt out of the crop residue burning, and there has been a short gap between the rice harvesting and the wheat sowing season. So we need to have a manual removal of the stubble, which is expensive. Now burning in this case makes it cheaper, but there has been a new mechanism which has been brought, which is called as Happy Seeder. Now these can cut the stubble and then sow the wheat simultaneously with a smaller rent that they charge. And then there is then a lack of infrastructure to collect and transport the crop residues for biogas plants. So regulations have been brought in under the NGT for inconsistent enforcement, but there have been key interventions which are in the form of crop residue management scheme, promoting the multiple crops, revamping the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, investments in the bio supply chain, and then there has been focus on the impact of the crop residue management scheme, that is mainly in the form of biocomposting for chemical fertilizers, the residue for the biofuel and power generation, and the amount of carbon dioxide emissions which could reach to nearly 20 million tons through the process if we try to curb the stubble burning. So those are some of the areas under which the idea has been propounded. So there has been revamping of the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, investments in the biomass supply chain have been brought, and there are numerous management technologies across various sectors that have been decided. So what are the management options for crop residue? So there could be in situ techniques, there could be ex situ techniques. In terms of in situ, mulching is one option, where that mulch is being distributed on the soil so that there is no erosional impacts onto the land. Then the next one is no-tilling, which involves sowing the crop without disturbing the soil. This conserves the moisture and reduces this erosion. So Happy Seeder is one such technique. Then strip till farming. Now here narrow strips of soils are used for seeds to be planted, and the rest of the field is covered with the residue. And then there is cover crop and crop rotation, which again the cover crop helps as serving the mulch later. The next is the ex situ technique. So these were the in situ within the farm that you can do. Ex situ is you can take that for biofuel generation, use that as animal fuel, animal feed, then use them for composting, for increasing the soil fertility, as a biochar, that is the heating residues in the absence of oxygen would create biochar, and this is a carbon rich product which increases the fertility. And then there are industrial applications which could be in the paper, textile and packing world. The next is, as we saw, a lot of stubble is being produced, so managing that stubble is important. Also, we need to understand the measures for increasing the subsidy support, specifically the co-ownership models and providing financial incentives. So scaling up enterprise by incubation is another important aspect that we are focusing on through the National Rural Economic Transformation Project, the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, the National Livelihood Mission, which is the first India's incubator program. And then there is programs which have been empowering the self-help groups, observing that the self-help group ecosystem and the other enterprises are unsatisfied if the support is not properly made and the country is not made self-reliant. So there have been various key services which are being needed. For example, the start of the initial funding, then the angel investors, collaborative space for networking, legal business registrations, and overreaching for the micro industries to be established. There are various states which have been selected, for example West Bengal, to support the self-help groups for enterprise and nurturing them for self-sustainable ventures. Then cluster-based models have been adopted for specifically for food processing, for handicrafts, for different local crafts, under the brand Disha. Then there are state fairs which are being organized. Institutions like Tata Trust and NIFT have been working for branding, packaging and designing them. The coordination and the challenges have been high and understanding them have been important. Now there are various ways to actually counter those, which includes higher growth oriented entrepreneurs who are committed to the businesses, the early stage entrepreneurs who are implementing it, a sector specific approach which is adopted, and inclining the efforts strategically to the right direction. Also bringing in local cooperatives and local communities is one important way. Through the FPOs, that is farmer producer organizations, we are focusing on inclusive growth, and then the growth which is people centric, bottom up, is very essential to understand. So these cooperatives have been working well in numerous directions. So milk production, food production is one such of the aspects, and then there are other aspects through which these have been working, which mainly come in the form of transparency and sustainability. Also, empowering the village level institutions is really important and vital. So a holistic development and transformation of the village is important. Also, another important discussion in this edition was on yoga. 21st June has been marked as the International Yoga Day, and bringing yoga to the world with the idea of universal inclusive practice has been important. So My Village, a Healthy Village has been one of the remarkable stories from the Trikita Panchayat in the regions of Kerala, where at least one person in every family is a yoga practitioner, and there are 15 training centers, and this has attracted nearly 2,500 people receiving yoga training every year. Now this is one such example, but there are other inspiring stories in the regions of Karnataka, where Yoga Gram or Yoga Hali have been established, where 80% of the residents practice yoga on a regular basis. Yoga in Papnashini has become a daily way of life, and it is basically being taken for the traditional healing, traditional medicine, Ayurveda and wellness centers. So the areas that we talked about, it's where the yoga is not just physical practice, but it is a public health tool, affordable, and these villages have brought in a way through which the lifestyle diseases could be prevented and tackled successfully. So community driven yoga movements and yoga approaches have been crucial in this line. So those were some of the important highlights that we have discussed in Kurukshetra edition for June 2025. We do cover Yojana, Kurukshetra and Down to Earth on regular basis. So stay subscribed, stay tuned for further updates. Have a great evening ahead.